Hey everybody, welcome back to Behind the Curtain. We have something a little different today. We have our first guest on the show. It's going to be really interesting. This guy has got quite the testimony, and he likes to discuss topics similar to what we do on this podcast, some of the peripheral, fringe biblical topics. So it's going to be fun. And I believe Josh invited him on the podcast before we even started, like a month or so before we even started our first episode. So it's fitting that he's our first guest. So we had a lot of fun doing this interview. We hope you enjoy listening to it. And so without further ado, here's Jed Payne on Behind the Curtain. Start with some chit chat and see where it goes.
No, it's funny how we were when you were saying thanks for coming on, we were let's see, I started the podcast with my buddy John, and early on I think it was like episode 8 or something, we asked another podcast who ironically is not even around anymore, but we're like, hey, blah blah blah, do you want to come on or something? And they were like, yeah, usually we don't go on anybody's podcast if they have less than 10 episodes, because and I was just like, okay, all right, thanks.
Never mind.
And then, ironically, they are no longer around. Which I get. I would never say that out loud, but I get their point now, because it's one of those, there's millions of podcasts now, and a lot of people think it's all you got to do is just have something to say and set up a microphone and record, and people are going to listen.
Right,
it's not quite that simple.
No, it's not. I think our plan with this was, first it was just for us. It's like, hey, we're thinking a lot of weird things that people around us are not thinking, at least in our sphere. Let's record it. And we were already having the conversations about the Bible and all the crazy stuff. We're like, let's just hit record and just see what happens. And people around us in our sphere, they're like, man, we listen to that. We've never thought of those kind of things before. And it's at least opened them up to, thinking about the Bible and God in a different way. So, yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that is what will give it longevity, is because a lot of podcasting too is just speaking into a vacuum where it's like not even really sure what's landing, what's not. And so it's like it was not going to stick if I wasn't at the end of the day doing it for myself.
Yeah.
And I just started bringing on basically people that I wanted to talk to, and things that interested me, because it's like, and then mine is a lot of self-disclosure, which I'm still not sure if eventually that's gonna come back and bite me in the butt, but we'll see.
That's good.
Usually, I have found that blunt honesty is rarely a bad thing.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe one day I'll be applying for some job and they'll.
Like you said here in.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think with social media and all that stuff, people can find out every little detail about us without us having to say anything almost.
That's why my Facebook is not my name.
Right. No,
I did that over a decade ago because of my dad, because I was on drugs at the time, and he was like, and my dad works in human resources, so he was like, son, take your name off of that, please. I was like, oh, okay, good. And it turned out to be really good advice.
How did P. Masta Jetty become the handle?
Straight up true story. I was on mushrooms at my buddy Russell's house, and I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever. I thought it was the apex of comedy. I typed it out and just laughed and laughed and laughed. I mean, it's not that great,
right,
but
right.
At the time, it was the funniest thing I'd ever done in my entire life.
That's awesome. Now I do like your Instagram handle a little better because
Yep.
being a Star Wars guy, I saw the Jedi. I was like,
Yep.
it's clever.
And it's actually, yeah, and it was supposed, I think originally it was supposed to be like Will I Am, like the Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
But it's also Jedi, yes.
Nice.
That's why I got into Star Wars, man, because of my name.
That's great. Well, that kind of segues into the Din Djarin costume. And
Yeah.
I want to know all about it. We'll talk about Nephilim
I was
and
gonna
Jesus
say,
and all that stuff later.
This was on the top of Josh's list. Then we have so many things we want to learn about. Hear what you have to say. And the top thing on Josh's list was the Mandalorian.
Like Jesus and all that. But wait a minute, you have a costume.
Yeah, dude, that was, so yeah, I have a Mando set of armor. So like since I was a kid, I've always wanted like a Boba Fett armor, right? And my buddy, shout out Andrew Mullins, my buddy got really into 3D printing, and he was like getting better and better and better. And like one day I was like, dude, could you do like a full like set of armor? And he was like, let's try. And he like test print, I think the first pieces he printed were the thigh plates.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, I can do this. And he graciously, all I had to pay for was materials. He was just like, it's a learning process for me.
That's so cool.
And then, so that was the easy part. And then it was a 9-month after work project of just like, I repainted that thing. Cause it's like if anybody's familiar with like 3D printed raw prints, they are not ready to be painted. They're not ready to be looked at. And then I joined all these, armor forums, and they are so critical of like, if they see any print lines, basically you're scum.
Yeah.
Like you're no good.
Yeah.
And so it was just hours of sanding and priming and coating, and then trying to get the exact, the actual paint they use in the show is like a couple $100 for like 3 ounces. It is crazy expensive. So everyone just kind of has their own little pet way of getting that finish right. Yeah, and I just worked. It was during COVID too, so it was like a really good
That became your life.
quarantine project. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm a part of some of those forums on Facebook, and they're very, very serious about the cosplaying and the movie accuracy. And
like if I wanted to join the 501st, like the official, the requirements are unbelievable.
They're like pages of stuff.
Everything has to be made. Like everything has to be made.
Like,
it's just
I bought this from Target. Is this good?
No. They're not gonna accept it. But yeah, that was fun, man. And then I've trooped in it a couple times. I've wore it to a couple conventions, and they were all during the summer, and everyone I almost died. It was just completely soaked through with sweat, but it was super fun.
That's so awesome. Well, I'm highly envious of it, and I've noticed like on your social media, you guys have, I'm guessing your friends and loved ones love these costume parties.
Yeah, like my groups of friends that like get together, all of them were originally like people that I got sober with. So that's kind of if you get a bunch of addicts and alcoholics that got sober together, and then you take away the drugs and alcohol, like we got to do something.
Yeah,
so
wow.
we were always doing stuff, and so that kind of carried over. Not everyone is sober these days, but we still all get together, and we're still all trying to I'm just a social person by nature, so I love doing stuff in groups. That's why COVID was such a rough patch.
Well, Jed, people that don't know you, why don't you give us a brief, hey, this is who Jed is, this is my story.
Yeah, it's always a struggle to like sum it up, but I think I can. I mean, so I was, I'm not a Louisiana native. I'm from South Carolina. I grew up in a very small PCA congregation, Presbyterian Churches of America. So my family was super Christian. My parents were like I think my dad was like a born again. My mom was always raised in it. So there was never any like drinking or alcohol or anything like that, or couldn't watch PG-13 movies until I was 13.
Right.
Like secular music was questionable,
Right.
that sort of thing. I grew, but for whatever reason, and it's probably just genetics, my constitution, the brain that I have, I really latched on to the guilt and shame, and I've recently heard it defined as it's actually like an OCD subcategory called like religious scrupulosity or like religiosity, where like obsessively saying the sinner's prayer. I've been baptized like 5 times.
Right.
As a young kid, really concerned that I was going to hell and that everything I was doing was like angering this God who at the same time loved me. So like a lot of confusion. And then being a youth group kid and growing up in purity culture, and so where sex was the number one, you can murder someone, but don't you dare have sex before you're married. That's the worst thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I stumbled upon drugs and alcohol, it was a solution to all the guilt and shame that I felt. And then I would get even more guilt and shame from doing drugs. And so this cycle just sort of started. And I was still very much active in my church, in my youth group. So I just started living a double life of, it was a double life, but then I started, it was just the sin, repentance, restoration cycle is what I would go through, especially with like stuff like masturbation and stuff as a teenager. Like, oh my, these like, I'm never going to do that again. Oh my God, I'm the lowest of the low. And so then like, I really had this just like horrible association of, God, purity culture really messed some people up, because it's like this weird idea. It's like sex is this horrible thing, but as soon as you get married, it's the greatest thing in the world.
Beautiful. Right. God made it.
All of a sudden, it's okay.
Yeah, and they're like, your wife, y'all can just do whatever you want. It's just gonna be the greatest thing in the world. And so many of my friends got married at 18 just so they could have sex, and those marriages did not work out. So really what steered my early drug use was being a adolescent teenager wanting to have these sexual experiences and figuring out that drugs would allow me to do that guilt-free. That's what I've kind of figured out is what really kind of pushed me. And, I didn't take the, I guess you'll say, standard route of just, drinking on the weekends or smoking a little weed, because I got caught smoking weed when I was like 12 or 13, and my parents started drug testing me. And so it was like I had to find things that wouldn't show up on drug tests. And those things back then were like cough medicine and whippets like nitrous, and just, it pushed me into more extreme things like mushrooms and LSD and things like that. Then I also kind of, it's like I had this idea that since I was a Christian, it's such a ridiculous rationalization, but I would like look at other of my peers like drinking and smoking and just being kind of like chill about it. And in my mind, it was like, well, they're going to be doing that their entire lives because they're sinners, but eventually I'm going to stop this. So let me just get everything out of my system and get it over with, because I'm a Christian and I'm not going to be able to use. So so when I was 17, that's when I tried heroin for the first time, because I'd gotten put on a waiting list to go to a faith-based treatment center in North Carolina. And while I was on that waiting list, the same mentality. It was like, well, let me let me just check all my boxes
Before I
so that
leave.
can just leave. Yeah, it didn't work. And then basically, I mean, I was just in and out of treatment centers and jail from the time I was 17 until I was 27. And then, finding sobriety in 2014, and then deciding to go into the field and become a counselor in 2017, and that's the field I've been working in since then.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that's kind of the very brief.
Well, man, I find this really fascinating that so you that whole time never kind of rejected God. Like, you still thought of yourself as a Christian. At any point, did you consider
There
like
was 2
atheism or
years.
agnosticism or?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was 2 years. So no, I never, and it was, so, especially from that first faith-based treatment center where they did not endorse any sort of 12, their idea was it was very fundamentalist.
Pray
it
the
was
gay away.
Name it. Yes, name it. We actually had a gay kid there who was there to get reconverted. Yeah, it was wild. And this is back in 2005, so I mean, this is a while ago. But their thing is like, you've been healed, you're good to go, so just go and sin no more. And when that, so yes, a lot of it was just this big confusion about like, why isn't God just healing me? And so there was finally a period, I guess I was around 21, 22, 23, something like that, where I was just like, whatever. I don't believe in addiction as a disease. Like, it was just basically, I don't even necessarily, like, this God thing isn't working out. I don't know that I ever outright like denied it with words or anything, but I definitely started living like he wasn't real, that none of that was true, that all I really wanted to do was just get loaded. And even still through, and so what brought me back from that was getting arrested and having another spiritual experience in jail. So it's been unavoidable, really. It's like, at this point, I just can't imagine anything that would make me not believe. I just don't. And for part of it for me is that in my mind, I've explored the alternatives and I've chased like just pure physical pleasure, and that doesn't work out. So, and then it's, and I don't even necessarily have, I've kind of given up trying to argue that with other people. All I can say is it's just like personal spiritual experiences that I just can't refute. I can't deny. A lot of them I have like in my own writing and journals and stuff. Even though I forget about them, I can still go read them and be like, yeah, at that point, there was not a single thing anyone on earth could have told me to tell me that wasn't true. So, go ahead.
What's the longest you were in jail for?
It was 4 months.
And you said
in
you
East
had,
Baton Rouge.
oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Gosh. Lord.
Yeah.
You said you had spiritual experiences there.
Yeah, it was there were 2 of them, and it was just it's one of those, they might not sound super profound, but at the time it was just like, whoa, that was bizarre. Like, the first one was I ended up owing everybody, this was like the first month I was there, I ended up owing, there's a thing in there called like 2 for 1, where like if you don't have money for your store, you can get things on credit for other people. If you give me 1 packet of ramen, I owe you 2, right? So I owed a lot of people money, and I was supposed to get money in my account, and it didn't come in, and it's just like, you're just gonna get beat up.
Yeah.
Like, that's the cost. And it was the night that basically everyone was like, yep, it's going down tonight. And I was laying in my bunk, and I had forgotten that I had a couple weeks prior, I'd filled out a form to go work in the kitchen. And so I'm just laying there. It was like 9 o'clock, and like the lights out at 10. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to get killed. And a guard.
For 10 ramen packets.
Yeah. And a guy, the guard comes in and is like, Payne, pack your stuff. You're moving. And I was like, it was just like, okay. It was just straight like plucked out of this situation. And then so I started working in the kitchen, and you start at the bottom, you start in the dish pit, and you work your way up to serving food, which is the easiest job. The dish pit is the hardest. And there's about 9 spots between the dish pit and the serving line. And the only way you move up is if people get out or they screw up. And so it's hard. I mean, you're washing, a couple hundred dishes 3 times a day. Crazy with no, you're working 3 days on, 2 days off from like 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's rough. It's a hard job for no pay.
Yeah.
Right. And so I like got there at the dishes, and I like prayed again, and I was like, God, thanks for getting me out of that spot, and in here, and I'm just gonna, if I'm gonna get through this, like I'm gonna need your help. And it wasn't like 3 seconds after I prayed that a dude on the serving line took a bite out of a peach and threw it back in the bucket of peaches, and the corrections officer was like, Brumfield, get off the line. Payne, move up. Ooh. And I like right then I went from the worst to the best. Dang. And it was just like in my mind, I just like chills all over. I had to like run to the bathroom, and I just like broke down because it was just like this in my face, like I'm still here and real.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was bizarre.
That's so awesome.
And that was like the turning point for you, or?
That was a turning point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of course I'd like to say that, everything was great after that, but it was not.
Right.
But it was a turning point for sure. It's what, like, that point in my life had gotten extremely dark. Like really, really dark as far as like things I was involved in, people I was involved in, the way I was thinking. It was just a bad time, and absolutely convinced if I hadn't have gotten arrested, that I would be dead, or like in much more serious trouble than I was in. And my mom had said too, the other thing too is, everybody knows the faith of Christian woman. Right. Yeah. She had told me that she woke up in the middle of the night and just heard God telling her that she needed to let me go. She's always praying for my protection and all that stuff, and that she needed to let me go. And she said that she prayed that, and it wasn't shortly after that I got arrested. So that was kind of interesting too. Yeah. She always called that officer an angel, which I disagreed, right. But I understand.
He's a messenger of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But so I want to know then, when you started getting serious about your faith, coming back to Christ, studying the Bible, whatever, from listening to your podcast, some of the questions you ask and points you make, like you have like a higher than average understanding, I think, of the gospel and of the Bible and stuff. So like, how did you get from there, that like those moments of just rededicating your life, kind of the basic Christianity, to like deeper study? What made that jump for you?
So I guess my first real C.S. Lewis and this guy Philip Yancey were the people that I read the most earlier on. But I would say I'd say the real like adult shift in my thinking came in 2014 when I got sober. That was when I started the first crack in my foundation was, and this was all around the time when, like, you know, deconstruction was the buzzword, and things like the liturgist was taking off, and Rob Bell had done his thing, and so I started. My first crack was, you know, maybe the Bible doesn't really support eternal conscious torment, and so I started reading a lot of Preston Sprinkle and Francis Chan, and I think because what had happened was I realized in getting sober that, okay, I have all these answers that when people ask me, what do you believe, I can spit out all these answers. And then I had to realize, then why does your life not look a single thing like that? And so then I had to admit, because I don't really believe it, or the belief doesn't have any sort of weight that's changing. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to put some effort into this. And so I started listening to Bad Christian and Pastor with No Answers and Theology in the Raw. I was working as a fiber splicer at the time, fiber optic internet, and so I just had all day working by myself, just listening and like consuming, and really getting into different thinkers. Like really got into Me Without You and Aaron Weiss and the way he thinks, and
they just did their farewell tour, didn't they?
Yep.
Is it over?
They came to Baton Rouge.
Yeah, they did come to Baton Rouge. Yep.
It was awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was the big shift. Was I really, before, I guess I had and I'm still I mean, to this day, just unlearning bad habits of and I've also, I guess I would say, you know, through my life I've had really, really good male mentors, and probably because, I mean, I got sent to Louisiana when I was 17, and I've never been back home. So like I've kind of had to pick up, you know, some surrogate fathers along the way, or like mentors, or like male role models. Not that like me and my dad have a bad relationship, just physical proximity sort of thing. And I always had like really good mentors that would take me under their wing. And it's funny how, I mean, I guess it's kind of like what the Bible story is too, of like God meeting people where they were at in the Old Testament. It's kind of been the same story for me too, where it's like, okay, I'm going to introduce this to you. You got that? All right, now let's go to level 2. And now let's go to level 3. And really just it took me, and I may have even done it this morning, but just simple things like starting off my prayers with God forgive me. And it's like doing that every day constantly really starts to foster this idea that, like, it's like, bro, you're forgiven. You can move on.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to flagellate every single time you try to talk to me. But those are just ingrained. Those are just things that I have to actively fight against. And like, so I guess the bigger thing I had to logically and rationally accept for myself was like the idea of grace. And like when I was in Baton Rouge, Grace Life was the church I used to go to. They were, I mean, hence the name, they were big on that too. And just, and then since then, yeah, it's just, and really, I would say the podcast has had a big influence on that, just because of the wide variety of people that I've spoken to, and just how many different beliefs people have. And it's interesting times, it seems like, for Western Christianity, and what people are going a lot of different directions.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, it's been a journey for us as well. Like, we were raised kind of Southern, you know, charismatic church stuff. My dad was a pastor for 12 years. Ryan was a Christian kid for a long time. But
My parents got saved when I was a toddler, so we grew up in church.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but we've never struggled with the drug stuff or any of that. So it was really cool to hear your story and hear how God brought you through that. And I love what you said about like the constantly saying, "Oh, forgive me," and that realization of like God loves you like a father, like you're His son. You don't have to like keep redoing these things over and over. Kind of like where Paul is talking about, like you don't have to go back again to repentance and start this whole process. So, it's funny because my son, he says thank you a lot. Like I'll buy him some chicken nuggets or something. He's like, "Oh, thank you, Dad. Man, thank you, Dad." It's like 5 minutes later, "Man, thank you, Dad." I'm like, "Dude, I love you, and I'm so glad that you're grateful. But you do not have to repeat these things over and over again. Like I bought you the nuggets because I love you. You say thank you. That's it, man."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm not yet a parent, but that's what I hear from most parents is that's like the clearest example of like unconditional love and how we should look at it. Have either y'all struggled with like depression of any kind or like any sort of mental health stuff?
I think I'm probably mental in some way, but not depression.
Let's say not right. Diagnosed. No, you definitely go through
yeah.
seasons of that. I think everybody does. So.
Yeah, sure. Stress and stuff like that. But I really loved I don't remember the name of it, but the episode where you talk to your dad, you get your dad on the podcast. Dude, it was so good. Like, I was in tears. I was like, this is so good.
That was early. Yeah, that was
very
early
on.
Too.
Yeah. And I was just like, man, I fell in love with your dad. He just sounded like such a great guy.
He is like he has we definitely had our issues when I was a teenager, obviously.
Same here, yeah.
But he definitely has been an incredible example. And of course, like every child grows up to find out that like you're just like your parents in so many ways, and so me and my dad are similar in so many ways. And he's very we got to have a fun talk. I can't even remember if it was like released. It may have just been us talking, but my dad is very Calvinist, Presbyterian.
Yeah.
And so it was like me, my dad, and like Josh Patterson and some open theism people, and we were like kind of going back and forth on but his he's always I guess as far as faith and stuff, he like I hate, and part of this is a struggle sentence over here. I always hated the idea of the just dumb Christian that just all their only answers come from they're just using, it's like that meme of the telephone talking to itself in the court or whatever, like they're only using answers from the Bible. It's like, so what I wanted to try to convey to people was that like I have a lot of the same questions that you do, and so do people that are far smarter than I am. And I mean, there have been thousands of books on like, why did Jesus die again? It's like people, you can still have faith and still not understand most of it. And you can still think about things critically. And, it's that whole, at the end of the day, the truth isn't going to have to defend itself, you'll arrive. Right. And I'm sure whatever, happens afterwards, whenever we get face to face, I'm pretty sure God's going to be like, oh yeah, all of y'all were way off.
Exactly.
But
yeah, it kind of makes me think of Dr. Heiser when he says, like, you're not going to hurt the Bible. You're not going to hurt Jesus.
No.
You're not going to hurt God.
No.
Like, none of this stuff is going to ruin him.
No, and that's what all of Psalms, and I mean most of the people in the Bible are like, nah, I don't even like what where are you people that were with Jesus, like, left and didn't believe, and like they saw it and they're like, maybe I didn't see it right, maybe that didn't happen. So apparently that's part of the deal, is that there's, and it's I moved away. Pete Enns, The Sin of Certainty, was actually a really good book for that, but moving away from having to be sure, because that, it was a good thing, like when I went through the deconstruction, but a part of me missed like 16-year-old youth group Jed that was just so certain of what I believed. There is a certain comfort in that. But I think it ran its course as far as usefulness goes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's part of why we started our podcast, because like Josh mentioned, Dr. Michael Heiser, we have the same questions everybody does about the Bible and spirituality and all that. And there's this gap between the lay people and even like pastors in a lot of cases and what Christian academia knows, and the idea that like there's answers out there for questions that people have if you're willing to, instead of looking at like a 30-second TikTok video, if you're willing to go read a couple books, you might understand why this is a big deal, or what the answer is.
Yeah, and that's I remember someone being asked, and at the time I was like, ooh, that is controversial, I'll just say it and let you pass. They asked him point blank. They're like, can a lay person or like a lay Christian pick up the Bible and understand it in its context and read it? And the guy was just like, no, I don't think you can. I think like you need to, like you have to understand, like you have to do work and some exegesis and stuff to find out what is the context, what is the Near Eastern context, and all this. And at the time, I was like, ooh, that is a hot take. But there's some, all of us have probably gone to the churches and sermons of just cherry-picked verses. And it's once that Pandora's box is open, it's so hard for me to close. Like where it's just like, I don't necessarily need 5 keys to a better week. Like, I really would like to be taught the Bible. Like, that would be cool. Yeah. That's like, I've most of my Sundays lately, I've been watching Greg Boyd's sermons. He's pastors Woodland Hills in Minnesota. And and my parents' church in Columbia, South Carolina is actually really, it's just, verse by verse, straight up teaching, and it's like, those are things I needed to know. I don't need to hear, for I have plans for you, plans to prosper, one more time, when it's like,
that's what I told Josh at one point.
We read that
I'm
last
so
week.
sick and tired of being encouraged. Like if one more person tries to encourage me, I might hit them. Like
like where is the
Oh,
it's like you can't say that without, I don't know the exact verse, but basically, like, you're going to have hardships.
Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
Brother will turn against brother for me, and, like, things aren't going to be great necessarily, and in fact, like, you're probably going to suffer.
Yeah.
But that doesn't put butts in seats.
No, it doesn't. No.
And
then that's probably, I guess pivoting to things like y'all and Blurry Creatures and me, that's probably why those things are extremely popular, is because people are starved for it.
They are.
And it does seem to have kind of split a little bit, maybe not an even split. I would definitely say in a Venn diagram, I'm in the middle of the hyper progressive kind of most of the spirituality and supernatural stuff in the Bible is metaphor on this side, and then on the other side, if there's a triangle in a building, then it's 100% Illuminati. You can definitely go.
Yeah.
You can go too far.
I'd like to say I'm in the middle. Maybe some days I lean one way or the other, but
well, my thing is I try try to exist where both are real, you know? Kind of like you said, like the Venn diagram being in the middle. There are things that if I'm watching the news, I'll say something out loud and my wife will be like, "You don't really believe that, do you?" And I say, "No, but hold on a second. Like, what if that was real, you know?" So
yeah, it was. I was listening to someone the other day who was saying like it's good practice to entertain everything.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily like you need to like. I feel like one of the most important skills for someone to have is just the skill of being objective and just being like, okay, nobody really investigates both sides of an argument.
True.
You know,
it's true.
And I feel like that's pretty important.
We're all cheerleaders of our own ideas. And it's funny that you said that about your dad. I was a Reformed Calvinist for probably 15 years. And
there is comfort in it, especially the predestination thing. Right.
And I started listening to Michael Heiser. I actually found him because my uncle had asked me about what I thought about aliens and UFOs. And so as a Reformed guy, you know, I was like, all right, well, I'll get right on it, you know, and I'll show you how that's not real. And I found Heiser, and he was doing the whole UFO conference thing. This is back in like the late 90s. And I was like, oh, this guy's really good. I was like, but he critiqued some of Calvinism beliefs, and I was like, dang, bro.
Yeah.
It's like, he sounds good.
I know. It's like if he's wrong, I don't have the evidence to back it up. You know, he sounds great. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And I feel like we're getting close. So, and then today, or whenever you listen to it, November 11th, the Graham Hancock Netflix show, Ancient Apocalypse, dropped today. I'm going to go watch that after this. So it's like, I feel like people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and all these people that go for the theories of the ancient advanced civilizations, I feel like we are getting close to everybody telling the same story. Yep. And for me, the Judeo-Christian biblical, extra biblical explanation of these things makes sense because I was like how I got into this is like everybody in the early, I mean, I probably for all of time, everybody that like smoked pot and tripped mushrooms loves conspiracy.
Ancient aliens, bro.
So I always had this conspiratorial mind, and so then where I got stumped was, okay, but if I'm a Christian, how do I reconcile this so-called like shadowy, unseen governmental world power force? How do I like what do they think they're gonna do? Like usurp God? So like how does that even? That just seems dumb. But so how do I reconcile the two? And when I kind of stumbled upon like Enoch and the ideas about like the Nephilim and like bloodlines and stuff, it's like, oh well, okay,
that makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
It's kind of the key, like the grand unifying theory of everything of like, you know, all these. I mean, I still hold that every culture has basically been telling the same story of all these pantheon of gods and just the flood myths, and like there was a world before that God wiped out and that was flooded, and it's been lost to time, and
the same,
it just made sense.
Same event, but just different perspectives. And you know, the Mesopotamians, they thought the sons of God were the good guys, you know, in the Apkallu and all that stuff. It's like Jews were like, no, they're the bad guys.
Yeah, and I think obviously the more technology and science and everything advances, the more we know. And everybody says it all the time. The more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. Like you don't know how much you don't know, right?
Right.
And so I think that as we're kind of advancing, we're realizing like we don't have the answers for a lot of the things that happened back then, and people are getting more willing to entertain kind of these, you know, left field theories and stuff.
So, going back to the drug stuff, I really want to get into, like, if you have the time, what was the most significant, like, spiritual experiences, or if it was, you would say spiritual experiences or hallucinations, or because I see this two sides of, like, Christianity when it comes to drugs, and studying drugs in the Bible and stuff like that. It's kind of this. It's a doorway to the spirit world, and you can commune with entities, and that's the way, you can get into conspiracy theories, where, like, the rulers of the world take drugs and they talk to entities, and that's where they get technology, and I mean, it goes way out there. And then you have this other side, it seems, that's like, well, no, it's just the chemicals in your brain, and they're firing off, and you're seeing things, and none of it's really there. What did you experience? Yeah.
I've always pushed back against the it's just chemicals, because they don't even they still don't understand it. They're just like, well, they can they see where it's happening in the brain, like what neurotransmitters are involved, but they have no idea. They don't. Right. Brain science is so poorly understood, and I mean, if you just read into it, it's all guesswork. Yeah. Like we don't even know what consciousness is. We don't even know what reality is really. We're constantly finding new stuff. So that one I disagree with. I lean more towards, it is probably spiritual technology. I guess I have theories on, if it could almost be like how bees see the world. They see all these different spectrums of color that we can't see, so their experience of reality is completely different. Right. And all it is like, they're not seeing things that aren't there. They're seeing things that are there constantly, always, but it's just, you can call it a different dimension, a different. So I think perhaps things like psychedelics and drugs allow you to see things in different spectrums, I guess, because I've had experiences with mushrooms where I just became fully convinced of God and spirituality, and really, to any atheist, I would always just say, try that. I mean, really, it's like, if you really want to consider, if you think that this reality is all there is, and that there's no God, try something like that and get back to me. And just because it's just, there is certainly this feeling of and with mushrooms, it's not so much you're seeing, dragons or whatever, but it's just like, it is, I've taken enough to where it seems to be you're stepping through some sort of veil of perception and seeing the world reduced or enhanced to fractals, and it's like a weird grand unifying design, and just just basically being like, well, there's just no way that there is not a God behind this. And on the darker side, especially in my early youth, there were, I used to see shadow people consistently when I was really the 2-year period, where I wasn't a quote non-believer, that I was doing a lot of methamphetamine and a lot of research chemical hallucinogens, which were like things at that time that people were just ordering from overseas and stuff, and they're just these incredibly potent research chemicals. And that was when I guess I would just seeing dark things and feeling dark motivations, seeing I have never like interacted, I would say, with a particular entity that I could like recount. It's always been more like observation. Like whenever I would see, like when I was doing a lot of Dramamine when I was a teenager, that was when I've seen the most realistic hallucinations and terrifying shadow creatures and things like that. And there was a palpable feeling of like observer, like that feeling when someone's looking at you, or if you enter a room that there's like an animal in it that you can't see but you feel it, you just know, like things like that.
But you felt it was hostile.
Yeah, back then. Yeah. And then I think, so it's a slightly different thing for me since I am an addict and an alcoholic, where, you know, I've also heard hallucinogens referred to as like spiritual pornography, where it can absolutely, for someone like me, I think it can be used in a correct context, and I think because I've just heard people's stories where that's how they became a Christian, was people have encountered Jesus on mushrooms and stuff. I think it can be used in the right context. I think it also, for me, like I was inducing a spiritual experience on myself, basically forcing something to happen that probably was not supposed to happen.
Well, you had the whole Heiser's talked about this before. We mentioned Heiser a lot because he's kind of like our rock star guy, but
oh yeah, he's the man.
Saul going to the witch at Endor. You know, and God, I guess, using that medium, literally, that was forbidden, but yet Samuel comes up and speaks to Saul and gives him the word of the Lord, basically. So pretty interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, it is. I actually like. I've had that. I totally. I mean, I've been involved with witches and Wiccans, and I've just experienced things that like I've been like healed by I don't know what they would call, I guess like some sort of like Wiccan spiritual healer, where I actually had like and this was during that 2-year period. It was my downstairs neighbor was a practicing witch, basically. It was a very terrible time in my life, but I had I had like a hernia like on my groin, like right below my belly button, and like actually she kind of healed it. So I don't really know what to make of that sort of stuff, you know what I mean? Because I was like desperate. I was like this is awful. I don't know what else to do. Can you? Because I know she was one of those like energy healers, right. And it like actually did something, and it actually kind of made me really nervous and terrifying.
Yeah, we talked about that, and the Bible talks about, you know, sorcerers and witches, and they had their books of magic in Ephesus, and that stuff worked.
I've been trying for the longest to get a practitioner on my show I've sent it out there so many times, like someone that can, because it's always talked about in vague generalities when people, but it's like, okay, so tell me something you have done that has worked. But then my friend told me that, which it almost seems like a, well, that's convenient for you, but they said that if you talk about it, then it's undone or it won't work. And I was like, so that's why nobody talks about it? And I was like, well, that sounds awful convenient. Or maybe that's part of the deal.
Kind
I
of
don't
a
know.
superstitious, being very protective.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that do money spells with crystals and intention and like moon ceremonies and stuff, and you know they swear it works, and raises have followed them shortly after they've done money spells and stuff like that. So I don't know.
Tell them to put my name in there next time they do.
Absolutely.
I can do it like
that's something growing up in a charismatic church, we were always taught like, no, the devil doesn't have any power. That's not real. That's, but like energy healing is a real thing, and there can, that's something that I'm bringing that up because that's something that I'm still realizing, like, as I study this, Jed, that like, there are people out there with real experiences that are not godly. And so like, how do you
Yeah.
respond to that when people say like, well, this stuff is real and it works and you're a Christian? Like, how do you interact with that?
And I have a good friend who, and there's a lot of blending. There's a, like when you especially when you talk about like white magic, there's like a lot of blending of people that they're like, yeah, I believe in Christ and I believe in Buddha and I believe in magic, and it's all the same. It's all the same source. And yeah, so I for whatever reason, I stick to my guns in that, like, I believe in that stuff there, and I also believe that I'm commanded not to mess with it. Therefore, like, I'm not gonna mess with it. Like, yeah. But because, like, for instance, one a friend, I had always thought crystals were bad, and then I did some research about how often they are in the Bible and how the Jewish priests had specific crystals that they had to put on their
breastplate,
garments and stuff. Yeah, and then I was like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, like, God made these crystals.
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
wait a minute. That's not, like, that's fine. Like, that's probably... Yeah, we should probably move more back towards like things of nature and the earth and God's creation. Like that actually. Okay, what? So it's a weird thing.
I think it's kind of like, in my mind, the way I kind of see it now, is like God, like you said, like God made all of this stuff, how it works, how it functions, whether it's spiritual or energy or what it, like, he created all of it. But it's like, we take it, or in my mind now, it was presented to us in a way that was away from God and not under his supervision. And so, yeah, the Book of Enoch has been a big eye-opener for me and Ryan. I kind of see that as like drugs being included in there. The Enoch talks about the Watchers teaching humanity how to cut roots and all this stuff, and like just weird, bizarre stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's we had to have been, if you ask the ancient peoples who told you how to do this, that's the answer they're gonna get you, the gods. Yeah, humans do profane sacred things. It's like the story of how magic mushrooms came about. It was just from this, the mother of magic mushrooms was just this old woman in a incredibly small Mexican village, and I can't remember who went there first, if it was like Timothy Leary or
McKenna.
One of the Dr. Shulgin, McKenna, but yeah, I mean, that is what brought mushrooms to the world, were them going to, and she, like, regretted it in a lot of ways because it's been taken from this sacred context. So yeah, and then, in the Bible, I guess this may be cherry picking too, but it's like everything is good, not everything is lawful, or however, or not lawful,
permissible or
permissible, yeah.
Profitable.
Yeah, so it's for sure these things, and if these things are creating, thin veils, or you are opening yourself up to, that's probably where the danger is it's like once you create a wide open flow of information to and from, it's like then you are opening yourself up to things that aren't God, or you run the risk of something telling you that it is God or it is Jesus and it's not. Right. And I guess that's where you testing the spirits, and I don't, yeah, it's these things are real, and they are serious, and I don't think they should be taken lightly.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering,
like,
was
well, I'm just thinking, like, why weren't we ever taught this stuff? It's like I've been in church since I was born. I never heard any of this. And,
Well, I think the
never
church
got
takes
the
a lot of
answers,
responsibility to like protect people. I mean, I feel like that's the kind of
Yep.
environment I grew up in, was like, no, we need to shield people from this. Like, we didn't watch Harry Potter when we were kids, and
Yep.
and I don't think I wouldn't blame for that. Like, they
Yeah,
were doing
yeah,
what they
yeah.
thought was right,
Right.
Me too.
But like, these things are real, and I kind of like how you put it, that how does it say, it might not be permissible, it might be good, but it might not be allowed. Just the idea that like the raise thing, using the crystals to get wealth or whatever, it makes me kind of wonder, like, yeah, that might be a real system that works, but when God tells us to trust him, are you like going around that? There's got to be rules for a reason.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't think these things were prohibited willy-nilly.
Yep.
Like, obvious, for whatever reason, we're not supposed to commune with the dead, for whatever reason.
Which
And
wouldn't be forbidden if it wasn't possible.
Exactly.
And that's some of the stuff
the
that I
biggest
was like
clue.
getting a little frustrated with. Like when I started getting into this stuff, it's like, man, I was just like blankets. Like I went to Bible college and like I never heard. It was always like, oh, that's not real. Yeah, it's just this blanket statement of like, man, I wish I'd have known what I know now back then. Then I'd be further along.
I know. It's just weird to me that if you believe in God, then why are those things not why, like, okay, I can believe in a God that created Earth out of nothing, but I draw the line at whatever we refer to as ghosts. Like, why? What are you talking about? Like, everything about our reality is supernatural. Like, this is just the weirdest thing possible.
Yeah, it's kind of like Christians that don't hold a supernatural view of Genesis 6.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's just people, Like,
yeah.
it's too weird for them or something. It's like you believe in a triune God that's a being that you can't see in another realm. It's like you believe in a Holy Spirit that fills you. It's like, how could you not just make that one step?
it's weird.
It's like, oh, that's
it
weird.
It doesn't seem like a huge leap.
No, it's not
to
at
me.
all.
Well, that's why the drug topic is really interesting too, because like we've discussed that the ancient understanding of the supernatural, now in the modern scientific era, we say, well, some things are natural and some things are supernatural, but really we all kind of exist together in the same place. So that's why maybe drugs, it really might be opening you up to perceive something that's there.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
so
Yeah, I think so.
Well, what was the like moment that like really got you sober, that you really, I guess, to end on like a hopeful note and joyful thing, like what was the impact or the moment that really made you like, I need to get sober? How did you do that?
I mean, really, it was just realizing that I could not do it on my own, surrendering to that fact, and I just got sober just working 12-step programs and really understanding that I had to help other people, other alcoholics specifically. That was the secret sauce, which is what I'd been taught all along, and I just realized that that 12-step programs is really a practical plan of action to live a Christian life. That's all it is. Like you can slot Christianity in there completely, and it fits like a glove. It's just making amends, asking God to keep me sober, thanking God for keeping me sober, making amends for my past wrongs, and seeking to improve my conscious contact with God, and then carrying that message. And that's that's really what it is, what it has been, on like a 24-hour period.
And you have people around you that encourage you. And
Oh yeah. Yep, and the support, we all help each other. I mean, I have a pretty core group of men specifically that we all just, and I mean, that was why I started the podcast too, because it is like what Acts talks about is like the perfect church of just like a small group of people sharing in each other's struggles, sharing in each other's victories, and we're united in our commonality of like addiction, but we all are also united in the fact that God is the one that got us out of this and continues to maintain it. And there really wasn't, we say too, it's like when it's your time to get sober, there's not much you can do or can't do. It's like that's when you're supposed to get it. So yeah, it's just keeping that, just dying to myself, because it's mainly a disease of selfishness, and so it's constantly being reminded that I have to die to myself and live for others, which is just basic Christian tenets. So it's
not some complicated thing. It's just, man.
No, it's simple, not easy.
Yeah, I love that. I love how practical you make it. That's fantastic.
Yep.
So the podcast is Church and Other Drugs. Is there anything else that you're involved in? Maybe like some heavy metal things that.
Yeah, I do. I did a guest spot on my buddy's band Capra, so I get to do that every now and then when they do a local shows. Yep. Podcast is Church and Other Drugs. You can find that everywhere. That's and then I'm back in school, so I got a full plate right now.
Nice.
That's about all I'm working with.
What school are you going to? What are you going for?
Going to UL. Working on my bachelor's right now, and then eventually getting a master's in social work counseling.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's great.
Oh, UL. That's where my wife went.
Yeah, man.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool, dude. We'll have to get you back on for sure. Maybe in the future, and talk about some more of the fun spiritual Enochian stuff. We nerd out on that stuff a lot, but
Sounds good, man.
Yeah, man.
Anytime.
appreciate you, Jed.
We really
We'll let you
appreciate
go,
it, Jed.
bro.
That's awesome.